Hey everybody, welcome to ASMR Angel Reads. We're going to continue with Catherine Care's Daggerspell, Book 1 in the Debris series. I just want to recap what we read in Chapter 1 because we're moving on to Chapter 2. Chapter 1, all the main characters were introduced. That was Jill, her father Colin, Nevin, who's the main character through the whole series, and Rodri, who is also ends up as Jill's husband at some point far down. But I think chapter 2 is going to be their original first lives that they lived. So I'll be sure to tell you which one's Jill, which one's Cullen, which one's Nevin, and which one's Rodri. Something else, since I can't pay attention and whisper and read at the same time, and my low voice sounds really gravelly and I dislike it, I'm going to read at regular volume, and then I will edit my video to be quieter, so I hope that's okay. Chapter 2 is way longer than Chapter 1, so I'm going to try to do 10 pages a night. That might put us at 45 minutes, but I'd like to get it done in 4 days, so we'll see. Chapter 2, Devery, year 643. If you write in the sand with a stick, soon the waves and wind will wash away the words. Such are the mistakes of ordinary men. If you cut words into stone, they remain forever. A man who claims the Dwemer becomes a chisel. All his misdeeds are graved into the very flank of time itself. I can't see in the dark. Oh, who said that? That was said by the secret book of Cadwell the Druid. The storm came at sunset, hard rain and wind that made the spring forest tremble. By dawn the roof of the hut was leaking, a thin but steady trickle in the corner that grooved the dirt floor before it escaped under the wall. Rhaegar stood with his hands on his hips and watched it run. The way out won't be so easy for you, I know, the prince said, but I'll be back here before the Valentine feast, I swear it. And that prince will be Nevin soon. Rhaegar smiled as if he doubted it. He picked a couple of big logs off the woodpile in the corner and laid them on the small stone hearth. When he waved his hand over the logs, the flames sprang up and flared along the bark. The prince let out his breath with a little hiss. You'll have to get over your infatuation with these tricks, Rhaegar said. The true dreamer lies deep within that. So you've said, but I can't lie and say I've already gotten over it. True enough, you're a good lad in your own way, Galrion. That's Nevin. As supple as a cat, Rhaegar stretched his back, regarding the prince and with shrewd eyes. Rhaegar looked like an old peasant, short, barrel-chested, dressed in a dirty pair of brown brigga and patched plain shirt with a bit of rope around his waist, for want of a proper belt. His gray hair hung cropped and untidy. His gray mustache always needed a trim. At times, when he wasn't watching his thoughts, Prince Galaram wondered why he was so impressed with this man that he'd follow his orders blindly. It's the Dwemer, he told himself. Who needs wealth when you've got the Dwemer? Have you been thinking about this betrothed of yours? Rhaegar said. I have. I'll do what you told me. You should be doing it because you understand the reason, not just for following my commands like a hunting dog. Of course, but you're sure I can bring her on with me? If she'll come, marry her first and bring her along. Rhaegar glanced around at the skew-walled hut. It's not a palace, but we'll build her a better home by winter. And that girl they're talking about is Jill. Jill was supposed to marry Nevin in the beginning. But what if she doesn't want to come? If she chooses freely, then release her. Rhaegar paused for effect. Freely, mind you. But if we have a child, what of it? Rhaegar caught his sulky glance and stared him down. A vow is a vow, lad. You swore one to her. If this were the usual arranged marriage, it would be different. But you sought her and won her. A man who can't keep his word is of no use to the Dwemer. None. Very well, then I'll ride to Bragawin. That's her name. Bragawin is Jill. Before I go and lay the matter before my father. Good, she deserves the news first. Wrapped in his cloak of scarlet and white plaid, Galrion mounted his black horse and ran off through the unbroken forest of ancient oaks. In a little while he would return as a poverty-stricken exile to study the Dwemer, if he could fight himself free of his old life. Galrion was the third of the 4 sons of Adarok, High King of Debri. With 2 healthy heirs ahead of him and one behind in reserve, he was a disposable young man, encouraged all his life to spoil himself with his beloved horses and hunting, so that he present no coveting threat to his eldest brother's claim to the throne. He saw no reason why he shouldn't ride away from court, out of the way for good and longer a drain on the royal treasury. Yet he doubted if his father would see things so simply. Adarek II, the ruler of the recent and unstable dynasty, seldom saw anything simply. And there was the matter. Bragawin, the lord's daughter whom Galron had won over many other suitor. Only a few months ago he loved her so much that the weight of their betrothal time seemed an unjust torment. Now he saw her as a potential nuisance. Rhaegar admitted that Galron would make slower progress with his studies if he had a wife and children than if he were alone. There were duties a man had to fill if he were married, Rhaegar always said, but after 22 years of having every one of his royal whims satisfied, Galrion was in no mood to hear talk of duty. He was used to having exactly what he wanted, and he had never wanted anything as much as he wanted Dwemer power. He hungered after it. He thirsted for it. Or, as he thought about it during his damp ride through the forest, wanting the Dwemer with lust and burning inside of him. Once he thought he lusted for Bragawin, but now a new lust had driven that passion out. To delve into the secret lore, to learn the masters, the secret ways of the universe, to stand in control of the forces and powers that few people even know existed. Against rewards such as those, more love looked as valuable as pebble lying in the dirt. To delve into the secret lore, to learn and master the secret ways of the universe, to stand in control of forces and powers that few people even knew existed. Against rewards such as those, mere love looked as valuable as a pebble lying in the dirt. The prince's ride was a short one. One of the many things bemusing Galron these days was the way that Rhaegar had chosen to settle too close to the Falcon clan and Bragawin when Galron could stumble across him and Dwemer both. If he'd been but 10 miles farther south, I'd never have found him, Galron thought. Truly, Dreamer must be my weird. It occurred to him that his love for Bragawin was probably just a tool in the hands of his weird, drawing him to Rhaegar. Rhaegar himself, of course, had already hinted that there were other important reasons that Galron had fallen in love with her. Galron's heart sank as he remembered those hints. Just as the drizzle died into a cloudy noon, he rode out of the woods into the cleared fields and saw the Falcon Dun rising in the crest of the artificial hill, built for defense in this flat country. Round the base of this moat ran a pair of earthworks and ditches. At the top stood a wooden palisade with iron-bound gates. Inside stood the square stone broch and clutter of a round wooden shed and huts for servants. As Gowron led his horse in, the muddy ward came alive with servants. A groom running to take his horse, a page to take his saddlebags, the chamberlain to greet him and escort him ceremoniously inside. As the aged chamberlain struggled with the heavy door, the prince glanced up. Over the lintel hung a severed head, blackened, withered, shrunken, with rain dripping from the remains of the blond beard. Ragowin's father, Dwyn, held to the ways of the Dawn-time warriors. No matter how much the priests approached him, no matter how often his daughter begged him to have them taken down, Dwyn stubbornly kept his trophies up, the head of his worst enemy from the long flowed blood. Dwyn stubbornly kept his trophy up, the head of his worst enemy from a long blood feud. The great hall was warm, smoky, and light shot from the fires burning at either side. Up by the bigger hearth, Dwyn and Garrett is Jill's dad, Cullen. So Dwyn and Garrett were drinking in their carved chairs with a pack of staghounds sleeping in the straw by their feet. Garrett rose to greet Gowron, but Dwyn stayed seated. Sodded in his chair, a florid-faced man whose rheumy eyes glanced up at the folds of his skin. It was hard to believe that in his youth he must have looked much like his son, this tall blond warrior, square-shouldered with arrogant toss of his head. "Good morrow, my liege," Garrett said. "My sister's in her chambers. I'll send a page for her." "My thanks," Gowron bowed to Dwyn. "My lord." "Sit down, lad, and have some ale," Dwyn wheezed as he spoke, and coughed and nearly choked. Gowron felt the cold shudder, a bristling of hairs along the back of his neck as if a draught had touched him. Although Dwyn had been ill for years and never seemed to sicken further, Gowron knew with a sharp stab of Dwemer that soon he would die. A page brought Gowron ale, a welcome distraction from Dwyn's illness. When Gowron raised the tankard to Garrett with a friendly salute, Garrett forced out a smile that was the barest twitch of his mouth. It didn't take Dwemer to know that Garrett hated him, and Gowron merely wondered why. The door across the great hall opened, and Bragawin came in with her maidservant attendants. A tall lass, willow-slendered in dark green dress, she wore her long blonde hair caught up in a simple clasp. As befitted an unmarried woman, her eyes were as deep blue as a winter river, the most beautiful lass in all of Devry. Men called her with face that was dowry enough for any man in his right mind. Drawn by the love he thought he'd cast out, Gowron rose to greet her. He took both hands in his. Drawn by the love he thought he'd cast out, Gowron rose to greet her. He took both her hands in his. "I didn't think to see you so soon, my prince," Bragawin said. "That gladdens my heart." "And it gladdens mine, my lady." Gowron seated her in his chair, then took a footstool from the maidservant and put it down to keep Magawin's feet off the damp straw floor. He perched on the edge of the stool and smiled up at her while she laughed as merry as sunlight in a dark room. "Will His Highness honor me by riding with me to the hunt tomorrow?" Garrett said. "I won't, by your leave," Gowron said. "I have things to discuss with my lady." "She's not your lady yet." Garrett turned his heel and stalked out of the hall. When he slammed the door shut behind him, Dwyn roused from his doze, glanced around, and fell back to sleep. "Oh, here, Gwynny," Gowron whispered. I hope I haven't offended your brother by not riding with him on the morrow. Oh, Garrow's in such a mood these days, I can't talk a word of sense into him about anything. Here, my love, don't you think it's time he married? He put it off awful late. He'll be 20 at the turning of the summer. True enough, Gowron was remembering his dreamer warning of Dwyn's coming death. He'll be the falcon someday after all. Is there any women he favors? Not truly. You mean he can be such a beast? Bragwin giggled, hiding her mouth behind her hand. But Garrow rides to hunt with Lord Blaine, and Lord Blaine is Rodri. Lord Blaine of the Boars. His sister just absolutely mad for Garrow. I've been trying to speak well of her to him, but he doesn't listen much. I've seen Lady Isola at court. She's a lovely lass, but not compared to you, of course. The compliment brought another giggle and a blush. At times, Bragwin was a helpless little thing, unlike the women of the court who were trained as partners in rulership. Once Gowron had looked forward to the chance to prune and form his wife's character. Now he found himself thinking that she was going to absorb much of his time. Do you know what Isola told me? Bragwin said. She said that Blaine's jealous of you. Indeed. That would be a serious matter if it were true. Why? Ye gods think the Boar Rampant was involved in many a plot against the last dynasty. A lover's rivalry is a political matter when one of the rivals is a prince. Truly, my apologies. She turned to the woebegone over his snap that Gowron patted her hand. She bloomed instantly and bent down to allow him to kiss her cheek. Circumstances conspired to keep the prince from having his necessary talk with his betrothed. All evening Garrett kept them sullen company. On the bright and sunny morrow, Bragwin settled her father outside in the ward. Then she sat down beside him with her needlework. Much to Gowron's annoyance, the old man stayed wide awake. Finally, when Garrett stopped by on his way to the hunt, Gowron decided that since he might soon be Garrett's elder brother, he might as well put up the authority to good use. Here, Garrow, Gowron said, I'll ride a little ways with you after all. Well and good, Garrett shot him a glance that said exact opposite. Page, run and saddle the prince's horse. Preceded by a pack of hounds and followed by a pair of servants, Gowron and Garrett rode to the woods. The Falcon clan lay lonely on the edge of the kingdom to the north. The clan's farmlands stretched out until they met those of the Boar, their only nearest neighbor. To the east and south was nothing but unclaimed land, meadow, and primeval forest. It occurred to Gowron that Bragwin was doubtlessly looking forward to a splendid life at court that he could no longer give her. Well, young brother, Gowron said at last, there's something I wanted to talk to you about. My lady Bragwin tells me that you've won the favor of Isola of the Boar. She'd make any man a fine wife. Garrett stared straight ahead at the road. You're a man now, Gowron. It's time you married for your clan's sake. The head of the clan needs an heir. True spoken, I know my duty to my clan. Well then, Blaine's your sworn friend. It would be a fine match. Did Gwenny put you up to this talk? She did. Garrett glanced his way with bitter eyes. My sister knows her duty to the clan as well. As they rode on, Garrett was lost in thought, his hand on his sword hilt. Gowron wondered how this proud man was going to take it when Gowron swept his sister off to a hut in the forest instead of the palace. The prince was vexed all over again, and stupidity in getting himself betrothed just as he had found the dreamer. Does Gwenny think Isola would have me? Garrett said. She does. She'd bring a fine dowry, too. They rode in silence for some minutes while Garrett considered, his mouth working this way and that as if the thought of marrying a rich, pretty wife pained him. Finally, he shrugged as if throwing off a weight from his shoulders. "Grant me a boon, elder brother," Garrett said. "Will you ride to Blaine with me as my second in betrothal?" "Gladly. Shall we ride soon?" "Why not? The soonest done the best." That evening dinner marked a celebration. While the falcon's demesne stretched broad and prosperous, there had been few sons born to the clan over the past generation. If Garrett should die without an heir, the clan would die with him. In lands reverting back to the High King for the reassignment, every now and then Gowron noticed Garrett looking at the blade on the table, the blade of his table dagger, where a falcon marked was graved the clan symbol, and his whole life his duty and his power. And Garrett's the falcon, and Garrett is Colin, who has the falcon engraved on his silver dagger. Let's see, where did I leave off? "Does Gwenny think Yasala would have me?" Garrett said. "She does. She'd bring a fine dowry, too." They rode in silence for some minute while Garrett considered, his mouth working this way and that, as if the thought of marrying a rich, pretty wife pained him. Finally, he shrugged as if throwing off the weight from his shoulders. "Grant me a boon, elder brother," Garrett said. "Will you ride to Blaine with me as my second in betrothal?" "Gladly. Shall we ride soon?" "Why not? The soonest the best." That evening dinner marked celebration. While the falcon's demesne stretched broad and prosperous, there had been few sons born to the clan in the past generation. If Garrett should die without an heir, the clan would die with him, its lands reverting back to the High King for reassignment. Every now and then Gowron noticed Garrett looking at the blade of his table dagger, where a falcon marked the grave, the clan symbol, and his whole life his duty and power. After Bragawin escorted her father from the table, Gowron had a chance at a private word with Garrett. "My lady Bragawin was teasing me the other night," Gowron said, "saying Blaine's jealous of me. Is that just the maid's chatter?" "It's true enough," Garrett made the admission unwillingly. "But she's dwelling on a thing to please her vanity. Blaine will forget her soon enough. Men in our position marry where we have to, not to please ourselves." Gowron felt a cold touch like a hand down his back, the dreamer warning him of danger. Never had that warning failed to be so true, not since he felt it first as a little lad climbing a tree and knowing without knowing how he knew that the branch was going to break under him. The dun of the Boer clan lay full day's ride to the north. A stone brock rose 3 floors above the cobbled ward, and a proper wooden roundhouse for the important servants. Off to one side were stables that also doubled as barracks for the war band of 12 men. Lord Blaine's great hall was fully 40 feet across that dressed stone floor. 2 tapestries hung on either side of the honor hearth, and a fine furniture stood round in profusion. As he walked in, Gowron had the thought that Bragawin would be happier in the dun than she would be in the wilderness. Blaine himself greeted them and took them to the table of honor. He was a slender man, sandy-haired, good-looking in a rather bland way, with blue eyes, and always seemed to be smiling in jest. "Good morrow, my prince," Blaine said. Remember, that's Rodri. "What brings me to the honor of having you in my hall?" "My brother and I have come to beg an enormous favor. My brother decided that it's time for him to marry." Oh, have you now? Blaine shot Garrett a smile. A wise decision with no heirs for your clan. If so, if it's so wise, Garrett snapped, why haven't you made it one like it? Blaine went as stiff as a stag to see the hunting pack. I have two brothers. The moment hung there. Garrett stared into the hearth. Blaine stared at the prince. Gowron hardly knew where to look at all. Ah, curse it, Blaine snapped. Can't you dispense with all this mincing around? Garrow, do you want to marry my sister or not? I do, and my apologies. When Gowron let his eyes meet Blaine's, he saw only a man who wanted to be his friend against great odds, perhaps. But he did, and yet the dreamer warning slid down his back like snow. In the role as courting man's second, Gowron went to the women's hall, a half-round room above the great hall. On the floor lay bardic carpets in the clan's colors of blue, green, and gold and silver. Candlesticks stood on elaborately carved tables. In a cushioned chair, Rada Dowager of the clan Rada Dowager of the clan sat by the window while Yasala perched on a footstool at her mother's side. All around them lay wisps of wool from the spinning that must have been tidied away at the prince's approach. Rada was the stout woman with deep-set gray eyes and firm but pleasant little smile. Gowron had always liked her when they'd met at court. Yasala was a pretty lass of 16, all slender and golden with large, eager eyes. I come as a supplicant, my lady. Gowron knelt before the two women. Lord Garrett of the Falcon would have Lady Yasala marry him. When Yasala caught her breath with a gasp, Rada shot a sharp look back. This is a grave matter, Rada pronounced. My daughter and I must consider this carefully. But mother, my lady, Gowron said to Rada, do you have any objections to Lord Garrett? None, but I have my objections to my daughter acting like a starving puppy grabbing a bone. You may tell Garrett that we are considering the matter, but my son may start discussing the dowry if he wants, just in case Yasala agrees. Blaine was expansive about the dowry. Yasala, of course, had been filling her dowry chest for years with embroidered coverlets, sets of dresses, and embroidered shirts her husband would wear at his wedding. To go with it, Blaine offered 10 geldings, 5 white cows, and a palfrey for Yasala. Garrow, Gowron said, that's splendidly generous. What? Garrett looked up with a start. Oh, whatever you think is best. Yet that evening Garrett acted the perfect suitor, happy to have his lady within his reach at last. At table he and Yasala shared a trencher, and Garrett cut her tidbits of meat and fed her with his fingers as if they were already married, a gesture that made Yasala beam with happiness. Gowron and Rada, who were seated next to each other, found themselves watching the couple and occasionally turning to each other to share a thoughtful glance. Since the bard was singing and Blaine was laughing with his brother Camlin, Gowron and Rada could whisper in private. Tell me, Rada said, do you think Garrett will come to love my daughter someday? He'd be a fool not to. Who knows what you men will do? Gowron broke a slice of bread in half and offered her a portion. Is this better than no bread at all? You're a wise one for someone so young, my prince. Rada accepted the bread. Does that come from living at court? It does, because if you want to live to be an old prince, you'd best keep your eyes on every little wave of everyone's hands and your ears on everyone's words as they speak. So I've been telling your little Gwenny life at court is going to be difficult at first. She's lucky to have a man like you to watch over her interests. Gowron felt a stab of guilt. I'm as bad as Garrow, he thought. I'll have to offer Gwenny at least half a piece of bread, unless I find her a man who can give her the whole loaf. Courtesy demanded that Galron and Garrett take the boar hospitality for several days. The more Galron saw of Blaine, the more he liked him, a cultured man as well as a generous one, with a fine ear for the song of his bard and a proper knowledge of traditional tales and lore. Even more, Galron came to admire Rada, who carried out her dowager role in perfect act. She would make Brangwyn a splendid mother-in-law. At times, Galron remembered Rhaegar's insistence that she choose freely, but he doubted if Gwenny's poor little innocent Gwenny was capable of making such important decision on her own. Late on the second day, the prince escorted the dowager to the garden for a stroll. The spring sun lay warm on the glossy leaves and first shy buds of the roses. "I'm much impressed with your son," Galron said. "He should feel more at home in my court." "My thanks, Prince." Rhoda hesitated, wondering no doubt how to turn this unexpected honor to her son's advantage. "I'm most grateful that you favor him. There's only one slight thing. You'll forgive me for my bluntness, and I swear an honest answer will do, Blaine. No harm. Just how much does he hold Gwenny against me?" "My son knows his duty to the throne, no matter where his heart lies. Never did I think otherwise. I was merely wondering how fine his honor might be in matters of the heart. Let me be blunt again. Suppose Brangwyn was no longer betrothed to me. Would he spurn her as a cast-off woman?" Briefly, Rhoda stared as open-mouthed as a farm lass before she recovered her polished reserves. "I think my prince is trouble at heart to speak this way." "He is, but he'll beg me never to ask why. He'll tell you this much. He's troubled by the life of head of Brangwyn. Flatterers at court will come around her like flies to spilled mead." "Not just flies, my prince. Wasps come to spilled mead, and Gwenny is very beautiful." "She is." Suddenly torn, Galron wondered if he could truly let her go. "And I loved her once." "Once and not now?" Rada raised a doubting eyebrow. Galron walked a little ways ahead, letting her catch up with him in the shade of a linden tree. He caught a low branch and stripped the leaves off the twig to rub them between his fingers before he let them fall. "My prince is deeply troubled," Rada said. "The prince's troubles are his own, my lady, but you never answer me. Would Blaine marry Gwenny if he could?" "Oh, in a moment, my poor lad. I swear he's been enthralled by Gwenny's blue eyes. He put off marrying until he came of age, and then, well..." The prince stepped in, giving the boar another reason to chafe under the High King's rule. How would the boar take it if his mother hinted the prince was yielding to prior claim? "I've no doubt he'd honor the prince always." Smiling, Galron made her a deep bow. It would work out well, he told himself, yet the thought of Brangwyn trying another man's arms in his heart flared rage. Okay, that's all I can do for today. 6 pages. That's about a half an hour. I think that's just going to be standard, but chapter 2 is going to take like 6 days to get through, so maybe I'll post 2 a day here and there. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Bye.